swimming to ski racing to soccer, you name the sport, right? I've done this activity, and the walls always look the same. That when I ask a room full of coaches, what are the qualities of your best coach? It's always 80-20, 90-10, connection over knowledge. Now, this is not in any way, shape, or form to say that knowledge of the sport doesn't matter. When I watch Kale or Rob breaking down the intricacies of hockey, I'm amazed, I'm stunned. They're so good. And the more knowledge that you have, right, the more creative you can be in your coaching, the more, how you can do it. Like just talking to Coach Laz in the back beforehand, he said a lot of times his practice plans have a bunch of extra stuff so he can pivot quickly if it's not working or the players aren't engaged or whatever. So what I'm saying is that knowledge is important, but it's just not sufficient. And what I love about this conference and when Aaron asked me to come speak is because it's not just about X's and O's, right? Coaching is a relationship game. Coaching is about connection. How many of you, show of hands, didn't put any on the knowledge wall? Look at that, right? It's usually like a third of the room. And it's not because it didn't matter, right? It's just not what you remember. Some of you are older like me. Who's been invited to a wedding of a player before? I went to 3 weddings last summer. Not one kid said, "Hey, John, please come to the most important event of my life. You taught me the 4-3-3. Right? Said, you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You invested in me. You pushed me. You cared about me. That's coaching. What are some of the words? We can shout out a few things. What are some of the stickers you put on this wall? Respect. Passion. Fun. Empathy. Care. Anyone put demanding or made it hard? Yeah. So none of this has to do with, we're soft. No, demanding's a good thing. Athletes want that, right? They want to be pushed, right? But sometimes we cross the path from demanding to demeaning, right? That's not helpful. That's not what they want. Now, the first couple of years I did this, I used to bring all the sticky notes home and I would tally them up. That's a lie. I made my kids tally them up. And the number one sticky note, the number one answer more than double any other, caring. They cared about me as a person. And so I would do anything for them as an athlete, right? I think one of the best quotes to guide your coaching, I think it's Teddy Roosevelt. No one cares how much you know till they know how much you care. And then you can reach them. Then you can get them to get out of their comfort zone. It's all about caring. The research around this echoes this. Great coaches win the relationship game. So the top 5 qualities in the research: respect and encouragement, positive role model, clear communication, knowledge of the game, be a good listener. This is what our kids want from us. This is what will help them do best. So we have to be masters of the relationship game. We have to be relentless connectors over and over and over. How do we connect? The best coaches, the NHL coaches and the NBA coaches and World Cup winners across all sports, NCAA champions, they all talk about this. They all talk about winning the relationship game as the most important part of their coaching. The college coaches talk about, almost consistently, what's the most important tool you have? They say individual meetings, one-on-one. When I'm coaching youth, that might be hard, right? I don't have as much time as a university coach might, but that's still that minute here, that minute there, saying, hey, I see you. I see you. I know what's going on in your life. I coach a lot of youth, and so, if kids miss practice because they have orchestra or they're in a play or something like that, and I'm constantly I'll run into practice, see them beforehand. Hey, how'd the play go? How'd your piano recital go? Right? I see you as a human being. See, we coach a person, not a child. Coach a person, not an adult. And the coaches who get that, and the coaches who are the relentless connectors, they're the ones who have the most success. And they develop their knowledge of the game. But I would doubt that there's someone in this room that if I went up to you and say, quickly, you got 1 minute, draw me up a great practice, you couldn't do that, right? And what's really important to realize as well is that these are skills. And we can't have a fixed mindset to that. We can't think like, oh, it's just not me, I'm a lousy listener. Right? I don't care. I don't have passion. That's not me. No. We want to evolve. We want to grow as coaches, and we want to grow in that area just like we want to grow in this area. It's absolutely critical. Now, one of the tools that we teach a lot, we call it the river, right? We say bathe your kids in the river. So what's the river? When you make your players feel respected, when you make them feel important, when you validate them, when you empower them, when you make them feel relevant, they'll run through a wall for you, right? That's what we want. And if you don't believe that, do the opposite. Disrespect people. Don't give them a voice, right? Don't make them feel valued or important. You'll never get the best out of them, right? And this isn't just coaching. This is in business. This is in life, right? So how do you do that? Very simple. One person, one moment, one time. Coaching is so hard because we work with kids and it's public and it's emotional and we keep score. And yet something we say or do can stick with a kid the rest of their life. And we don't get to pick and choose what they remember and what they forget. I remember I learned this when I was coaching at Vermont. One of the first kids I coached called me up and he was like, he had just finished college and he was applying to med school. And he said, Coach, I just want to say thank you. And I'm like, Pat, why? And he goes, because every time I want to put my books down or every time I was in college and I wanted to leave the weight room, I thought of your words. I thought like, is that the best you got? Can you do one more? And so I just want to say thanks. And I hung up the phone. I told the coach I was working with that. He's like, that's great. I'm like, that's not great. That's the worst thing I ever heard. They remember what we say? Because for every kid like Pat, I was like, other kids like, hey, you should take up kayaking or something. But then if you think about this in your own lives with coaches or teachers, people ask me, they're like, John, how come you've written books? I grew up on Long Island, and I went to a Catholic high school, and when I was a junior in high school, I had a teacher, Brother Jeff Peterson, English teacher. And Brother Jeff marries handing back papers, and mine has a big red F on it. And he's like, and I looked at him, and because I was smart, I was just lazy. I was like, Brother Jeff, there's no way I got an F on this paper. I know it's better than these other ones. He goes, John, I didn't give you an F based on what they can write. I gave you an F based on what you can write. And this is crap. And then because it was the 80s, he took my books and he threw them out the third-story window. And he said, get out of my classroom and don't come back because you are a great writer. And I remember that day and I remember that classroom till today. And I dedicated my first book to Brother Jeff, the person who made me believe I could write. And a couple of years ago, Brother Jeff reached out to me. Do you think he remembers that moment? No, he threw everyone's books out the window. Right? One person, one comment, one time can change a life. And we all have the ability to do that if we're intentional, right? If we think about stuff, right? That's the rule of one. You bathe them in the river, you make those comments, you pick those kids out, and beautiful stuff happens, right? And yes, kids have parents. This sports psychologist, Jim Taylor, I know, he says, he works with lots of Olympic skiers and ski racers, and he goes, John, in 30 years of working with Olympians, here's what I've learned. All parents love their kids, 100% of them. And he said, 100% of those parents at some time or another love their kids in an unhelpful way. And some of them are mentally ill. And so we can't ignore the good ones because of the bad ones, right? We can't not engage with the good parents because of the not so good parents. And that's a hard thing to do, right? I know that in my coaching, right, if I saw, if my phone rang at 11 p.m. or 12 p.m., I'm like, oh, this is not good, right? Nothing good happens when your phone rings at that time. I think about all the times now, like a lot of us are coaching youth or coaching high school, but even college coaches are dealing with parents now calling in. And I don't know how many pro coaches are in here, but when I talk to pro coaches, they say, no, the parents complain to the agent and the agent complains to me. But it's still there. Well, what's happening with parents? I know a lot of us in this room are parents. Parents are scared, right? They're scared. They're afraid that their kid's going to miss out. They're afraid that they're going to let their child down. And so we have to understand where they're coming from. And one of the places that starts is we have to build trust. So I want to tell you a trust story here. So this guy in the picture, right, his name is the Great Blondin. And the Great Blondin was a French tightrope walker. And he used to come and tightrope walk over Niagara Falls every year. And he was this amazing showman. And he would always up the ante. And one year he walked out on the tightrope and he cooked an omelet somehow, right? But so one year he shows up with this cart. And it's hard to see in the picture, but there's thousands of people on the bridge. And he says, I'm the Great Blondin. Who thinks I can walk across the falls? And they're all chanting his name, right? And they're like, Blondin, Blondin. He says, who thinks I can push this cart across the falls? Blondin, Blondin. Who wants to get in? Because trust is not just about ability. I wish someone told me this when I was a young coach. I'm like, I was a professional player. I was an NCAA Division I athlete. Well, you should trust, right? You should trust me. Then I had my own kids. And I remember the first time we were looking for a babysitter, right? My wife and I looking for a babysitter for our, 3-month-old for our first night out after born. And, you're not going for a teenager. What are you like? Do you have a medical degree? Are you qualified to take care of my child? That's when I understood trust. Remember when my daughter was born, once I made sure my wife was okay, I walked outside and called my parents and apologized for everything I ever did. But that's trust. So what is trust? Trust is about, yes, our ability, but it's about connection, right? It's about connection. It's about all those words we put on that wall. And you have those in you, right? You have those in you. Because you had that coach or because you had that teacher, those things are in you. And sometimes the world just doesn't let them out. We feel the pressure to win. We feel the pressure to cut corners. And the connection goes away. Trust is about being believable, right? Do you walk the walk or just talk the talk? Trust is about being vulnerable and dependable. What I loved about Coach Laz's interview, I hope you all saw it, when he said, I screwed up. It's one of the most important things I think a coach can ever say is, I screwed that up. I screwed that up. I messed that up, right? I changed the way we were playing. I thought that was such a fascinating talk and breakdown of that game because those players didn't lose their skills, right? All of a sudden they went from playing to win to playing not to lose. That's in here, right? And what happens in here has this physiological response, release of cortisol. It gets harder to breathe, right? You get tight, tense, and tentative. That's what happens when we get too outcome focused. So by saying, hey, players, I messed that up, be a little vulnerable, right? How many of you have given an end of game talk or between periods talk and you're like, if you come out and you blame someone, then what do? They blame the next person in line. And they blame the next person. And it cascades down. And there's no ownership. But when you come out and you say, you know what? That's on me.